Welcome. You're watching CNBC Africa, a special feature, one today that focuses on investing in Mauritius, leveraging Mauritius's international financial center for sustainable African growth. Thank you for joining us. It's going to be very insightful to dig deep and dive into Mauritius as an investment gateway for the continent. Let's take a deep dive into the context of the conversation.
In 2023, Mauritius' GDP was approximately $14 billion. The island economy is recognized as one of Africa's most trusted and innovative international financial centers, and among the top in financial market development on the continent. It has evolved into Africa's leading international financial center, trusted by investors, fund managers, and everyone in between. Financial and insurance activities contributed about 13.4% of Mauritius' GDP in 2024. Mauritius is leveraging its IFC to de-risk African investment, foster regional integration, and drive climate-conscious, innovation-driven growth across the continent. Investors are offered a stable, well-regulated and compliant environment and 40 tax and investment treaties, providing secure access to key African markets. Ranked top in Africa for governance, the Mauritius IFC supports over 1,000 global business entities and contributes over 13% to national GDP, offering a proven platform for cross-border investment, sustainable finance, and digital financial services. The island enables green bonds, ESG-aligned capital, impact investing, and blended finance models, ensuring that the capital flowing through the IFC is aligned with Africa's development priorities and the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
I'm going to be your host for the next hour. So much for being part of the session. Thank you to our online guests and those also on digital platforms. And we have a studio full of members as well coming in to listen about Mauritius and how it positions itself for the future. So I'd love to actually take you through my panelists. I've got a great lineup. Let's see who they are.
The panelists are Kele Moyo, Executive Vice President, Southern Africa at Global International Corporates NCB. Bilal Adam, Chief Executive Officer at Stewards Investment Capital. Antish Basasur, Managing Director at Rogers Capital. Gareth Land, Head of Sales at Two Features. Janesh Chitu, Partner at Horizon Legal.
And let's get straight into it. And Janesh, I want to start off with you because I think it's important that we set the context on Mauritius and the IFC challenge or opportunity that it has now to really leverage all its assets for investors and fund managers and businesses. What in your simple terms is the value proposition?
Thanks a lot for this question, Zanele. In fact, one of the most important factors for any investor investing in a particular country, so for example, in Mauritius, being an IFC, or in another country, an investee country, is confidence, okay? And to be able to de-risk their investments. So what does Mauritius have to offer in terms of de-risking those investments? So basically, we're speaking about the legal, regulatory, and governance regime. So to start with, we have Mauritius is a democratic country, so we have the rule of law, where you have got separation of powers between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The second critical, I would say, component or factor is actually that we've got a hybrid legal system, and what I mean by that is we've got the British common law system and the French civil law system also. So investors can really understand, the legal system in which they are, I would say, buying into. Thirdly, interestingly, is Mauritius has never been subject to any political coup d'etat, okay? And fun fact, there is no military on the island because we don't need it. Another aspect also would be, the ultimate court of appeal. So the ultimate court of appeal is not in Mauritius; it's actually in UK, and it's the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. So this gives investors much more confidence in terms of, when they're investing. If ever there is a dispute, it will be treated in a fair, transparent, impartial, and neutral manner. Other aspect also is arbitration hub. Mauritius has positioned itself over the past, I would say, 15 years as an arbitration hub. So our law is modeled on the UNCITRAL model law, and the enforcement of foreign arbitral awards, which is something which is very important for investors, is actually based on the New York Convention. So these are, in a nutshell, what Mauritius has to offer in terms of the legal and regulatory regime.
So I think understanding the rigor behind Mauritius and the Mauritian system to be able to host private investors, I think clearly you are dealing with them directly. They're coming through your doors, moving into the Mauritius environment. One is, what kind of investments or investors or fund managers or businesses are seeing themselves finding Mauritius as a perfect place to channel their wealth and their work?
Thank you so much for the question, Zanele, and thanks for the context, Janesh. So I think my view really is obviously from a corporate and institutional banking perspective. So what we're seeing is really, I would call it a mixed bag of clients who are interested in the continent and interested in leveraging Mauritius to deploy capital across the continent. So I'd say multinationals. So multinationals, both from a European perspective, American perspective, et cetera, deploying capital across the continent, but also what we like to call large African corporates or large local corporates. So those are corporates particularly sitting, let's say, in the Southern African region, deploying capital across the continent. So we've found that Mauritius provides a suitable platform for them to do that because of the depth of the financial markets.
And I think wealth creation, legacy of wealth, entry into the continent, and an investment. And Bilal, maybe you can unpack that a little bit. So what is then the opportunity that they are seeing when they come through the continent, come through Mauritius to the continent?
Fascinating question. Thank you, Zanele. As my articulate colleagues have laid out, the infrastructure in Mauritius lays out the platform for investment to mobilize capital from the continent into developed markets, and also from developed markets back onto the continent. So what we see is often you see a large ticket investor from a US or European market that wants to mobilize $100 million, but they want to send $10 million into Rwanda and 10 into Nigeria and 10 into South Africa. And what happens is they would then use an investment in Mauritius, use the infrastructure that Janesh is talking about, use the custody and banking services that Chele is talking about, and hub that investment and use Mauritius as a platform to then implement and mobilize that capital for the growth and expansion of the continent through Mauritius as an enabler of that. Similarly, we see capital flowing the other way. So where we see capital that comes off the continent, that capital is usually looking for diversification from its currency risk. So that capital would come into Mauritius, and what we have in Mauritius is a multi-currency environment where you can have your account in dollars, euros, pounds, Swiss franc, rands, Mauritian rupees. And so what happens is many South African investors and other African investors on the continent would, for example, invest through Mauritius to get developed market exposure. And they're very comfortable with Mauritius. We have got South African pensions that invest through Mauritius, and they're comfortable with the banks. I think we've got one of the oldest banks in the Southern Hemisphere is MCB. How old are you guys?
187 years old.
Yeah, one of the oldest banks in the Southern Hemisphere is MCB. So there's a legacy of trust, credibility, and really gives comfort to our investor base.
And I'm hoping, Kelly, you're not the youngest employee in a 187-year-old bank, but we don't know the numbers. We're not here for those.
I'm definitely not as old as the bank.
hopefully. But you're also dealing with the emerging. You're in an emerging market. You're dealing with investors that are coming into an emerging market. It would be interesting to maybe to ask you, Antish, what is the standard that's being set through Mauritius of how to effectively be an IFC for emerging markets?
To start off with that, I'd say, we are a tried and tested jurisdiction. Okay, we've been, I'd say, at it in the making for more than 30 years now. And I say in the making because we have the ambition to improve our value proposition, okay? And to even suggest that you're an IFC, you need to have a sophisticated financial services sector, which in Mauritius is quite mature, okay? You've got a resilient banking sector. We've got 19 banks, so you've got the large international ones, large regional ones, large local ones, like Tele is the representative of the largest local bank in Mauritius. So with that, you've got the breadth of banking solutions that investors could leverage on when they are investing into the continent and beyond. And it's not just banking, right? There's the whole ecosystem. So there's the quality fiduciary service providers like ourselves, okay? You've got the auditors, the lawyers, the asset managers, wealth managers, names from the continent that have set up shop in Mauritius years ago now, okay? So all that together comes with the value proposition of the country as an IFC to the investor community. And I'd also like to add, in terms of our regulators, which are very forward-looking and they engage with the industry, they take our feedback, so together, we work together to make the IFC, the IFC for Africa.
And I think we're going to unpack that a little bit more a bit later, because I'm really keen to see the transition of Mauritius over the years and what the ambitions are going forward. But it was interesting on my flight to Mauritius, I think this was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I can't remember, sitting on the plane, and then the advert comes on about living in Mauritius and what an enticing value proposition and a lifestyle. And, I'd never been on a plane before and actually and heard it actively marketing itself also as a great place to live. So from a social, economic system, or just from living there. So Gareth, could you lean into what it feels like to land and be in Mauritius?
Privileged, Zanele. It's an amazing place to be. I've been going for 30 years now with my kids. It's been an adventure. Wouldn't change it for anything. I'm lucky enough to live there full time now. It's a total eclectic mix of everyone. You've got, I suppose, on a food-wise, we big foodies. You've got Indian cuisine, you've got Asian cuisine, you've got African cuisine, French cuisine, and it all goes into this sort of mixed cultural mixing pot that you can now choose where you want to go, where you want to eat, and everyone just gets on. And because you've got so many people who've all got a story on why they're in Mauritius and where they came from, everyone is the same. There is absolutely no class system there in Mauritius where you are talking to people, you are all the same. You're on the same footing. It makes it very easy to settle in and to live in Mauritius. But when we're looking at property, because of the strong framework we've got, Mauritius is not just property. It's not just bricks and mortar. It's a lifestyle. It's people who want to go there. You get to go to the beaches. You get to see all the beautiful things around there. You can drive down any road and you will have some sort of a religious church or chapel, or you will go past some little area that has got the most beautiful little place to worship. It might not be yours, but you think of the history that is there, the time and effort, the color that's got into it. And when you're in Mauritius, you embrace that. It is something that you don't always necessarily feel until you're in Mauritius, but you embrace it. You fall in love with it, you enjoy it. It becomes part of your soul, even if it's not where you want to go to. So property-wise, because it's not bricks and mortar and it's lifestyle, it becomes demand-driven because we've got amazing golf courses, you've got diving centers, we've got top-class kite surfing, the outdoor lifestyle in Mauritius, top class. That in itself keeps the property market going because there's always a demand. When you want to say, I want to go and retire somewhere else, or I need to move somewhere else, there's always people in demand wanting to take your place. So.
And Bilal, does that offer something to your investors coming into the country?
What Gareth's sharing really resonates with me because that's what I've lived. I went to Mauritius initially in 2007 to spend a year, and I've renewed that 18 times now. And one of the beautiful stories, Gareth shared a little bit about chapel, and it clicked something in my mind. In Mauritius, in Grand Bay, which is the tourist city, there's a mosque with a church across the road. And on Fridays, the church opens its parking for the mosque guys to use the church parking. And on Sunday, the mosque opens the parking for the church guys to use the mosque parking. And that is a clear example of how communities work together in Mauritius and get along so well. So just to support what Gareth's saying, it's really something I've lived and seen. And I think a big part of the benefit of Mauritius is also the safety, which is something as a South African we put a lot of emphasis on.
Mm-hmm. And I want to come back to some case studies of organizations that have landed in Mauritius and have enjoyed their time there. But luckily, you are in another country, not too far. I mean, it's so close to South Africa, so it makes it really attractive. Make it attractive regionally. Clearly, I want you to lean in on that later on. But I want to go into the structures that just govern trade across, whether we're looking at the AFCFTA agreements and all of those. How do they see and how do you see the interplay between all these other policies and things that govern, and how Mauritius also gears themselves up to connect and to reap the rewards and allow investors and businesses to participate?
See, if I'll take it on the aspect of the AU Agenda 2063 objective, which is aligned on United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So Mauritius is really acting as the conveyor belt or the conduit regarding investments. So just to, just a case in point, at the office, we've assisted clients with, who have actually invested in investment funds to go into, other African countries across the continent for projects with a development impact. Okay, so for example, we've assisted clients with, assembly of electric scooters in Zimbabwe. So that is something which is very interesting also. And also another example is, another client is American client. I cannot take the name obviously, but for the distribution of water across Africa. So really projects with a social impact. Those funds are being channeled through Mauritius and then being diverted to Africa. So this is the role that Mauritius is really playing.
And like you're moving into themes, clearly additional themes, so types of businesses coming in and finding a fertile environment.
For sure. I think before we get to specific types of businesses, what I'd like to lean into is around trade, right? And maybe just give you some fun facts, numbers. I'm a numbers girl. So, if you look at some of the core drivers around the continent, because I think we're an African bank with a strong passion for the continent. Now, when I tell you these numbers, you'll see why we have such a strong passion for the continent. So a key thing around the continent is the demographic dividend that we have. We have a lot of young people. So, if you look at what the projections are, we're expecting to have 2.4 billion people by 2050, with 75% of them being under 35. Now, what does that mean for trade? So when you've got that kind of young population, you're going to start to see a rise in demand for consumer goods, and we're expecting to see household consumption rise to about $2.2 trillion. So another reason we're passionate about the continent is that we really want to dispel this myth that the continent is poor. We're 2.2 trillion, that's by no means poor. So there's a lot of opportunity on the continent that we're seeing. So from a trade perspective, so leaning into what you mentioned around the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, I think that is definitely a step in the right direction. I think if we look at some of the headwinds around, kind of the geopolitical risks that we're seeing on the continent, initiatives like the Africa Free Trade Agreement we'll see a lot of benefit for the continent, and obviously Mauritius as a platform for driving that.
And I want to build on that, and I don't know who can take this question, maybe you and Tish, before I come to you, Bilal, is around the growing wealth on the continent. Like how are we, the numbers justifying millionaires, billionaires in the continent existing? Do you see that we are, and can you confirm and concur on the rising wealth of businesses and individuals?
Definitely. Because of, like Chile mentioned, the growing population, the growing opportunities, inevitably there'll be more wealth being generated on the continent. And we see a lot of that also coming to Mauritius. There is this statistic, I think from Henley's Partners report, and I'm quoting that, I think in Mauritius now we have about 5,000 millionaires in USD terms, and about, I think, 15 centimillionaires, right? Those who've got more than $100 million. So that's a very significant, and when you look at these numbers in terms of the proportion, that's 4% of all the millionaire population in Mauritius. And Mauritius represents, I think if I'm getting my zeros right, so it's 0.008% of the population of Africa, right? So we've got really an influx of millionaires, and they're coming in not just for the lifestyle and for the other reasons we've mentioned, but for the overall ecosystem that the country is being able to provide. And they're not just there to retire, but also to do business. Keep on doing business from where they are in Mauritius, keep their activities in Africa, structure in Mauritius, and do business from the country. So we've seen a lot of traction over the past 10 years. I think we've grown 80%, 87% in terms of that number over the past 10 years.
And that's quite interesting. Do you still want to lean in?
Yeah, just to add what my colleagues are saying, from a telecoms perspective, we at Stewards are passionate about telecoms, and we see that as a way to enable financial inclusion, because today financial inclusion and information inclusion have become highly correlated. If you don't have access to information, you will be left behind in the regenerative AI trend. So what's really important today is, as my colleague Janesh mentioned, Mauritius hubs a lot of, and is a platform to bring a lot of investment onto the continent, especially for infrastructure. And one of those core infrastructure themes is the telecom industry, where we enable people to have access to information, and that gives them the opportunity to benefit from being connected to the world. So every guy with his cell phone can now have access to a school or a shop, or become a shop, or watch CNBC, from his home. So that's really, I think, an important feature of what the private equity space is enabling.
But over to you guys. But the question as well is around, if you look at IFCs, they take on a different shape or form. And I'm looking at, when you drive through Mauritius, you're starting to see, what do you call them? Estates, closed up areas. And whilst they still maintain their social status, but people that are coming into Mauritius are not necessarily changing the landscape of Mauritius, in my view. So I want you to lean in and say, how is it shaping from that transition?
Zanetta, I'm going to disagree with you and say that the people who are buying into Mauritius are changing the landscape, because in the last 10 years, the upliftment for the local Mauritians has basically doubled and tripled. So I can tell you just numbers now. In the last 5 years, Mauritian buyers of homes are 11%. They were 4% 3 years ago. They're at 11%. More and more money is reaching into the pockets of the local Mauritian population, who can afford to buy, not necessarily where the foreigners are buying, but they can certainly afford to buy a house, not live at home anymore. The old tradition of having 2 or 3 tiers of your own family living in one home, that still stays where it is, and we love that. But it is so nice to see the population of Mauritius benefiting from the money that's coming into Mauritius.
And I think to clarify, is that you're not building large, huge, massive houses, tall buildings. I feel it still feels like an island. It's still maintaining its island look and feel and ease of living, without necessarily starting to look like Sandton per se, or Bryanston or what have you. But we can come back and we can say, if houses are changing and estates are being built and beautiful houses, what's the price? Like, I'd love you to throw a price or two and say, what's the most expensive to a medium-sized price of a property? Well,
look, I mean, we have projects. One of them is sitting at Lapi Rogue at the moment, okay, the hotel. And I can tell you $2.5 million will buy you a penthouse there. I'm also going to tell you that of the 8 penthouses, 4 of them are bought by Mauritian families. So please don't think it's foreigners who are all coming in just to go and buy. There's a lot of emotion in Mauritius where they still want to own and be involved in the beautiful parts of Mauritius. They want the family history. They want the family to be connected and part of it. There definitely is a lot more money in Mauritius in Mauritian hands, which is a good thing.
And maybe that lends itself for me to ask the next question: collaboration between African institutions and banks and international institutions in forming part of this environment. Do you want to go for it?
Definitely. I mean, the way you look at it is, just jumping on the previous point I made, just to throw a couple of numbers. I'm sorry, Tele, but I'll be the numbers guy also. So you have 450 global funds which are structured in Mauritius, investment funds, okay? And these funds, they have channeled since 2010 around $80 billion into Africa, okay? So that's a lot of money, and those were mostly geared towards, the development needs of Africa. So obviously there is a collaboration which goes on with Mauritius and, international institutions, generally speaking. And talking of which, you've got most multilateral institutions which are present in Mauritius: World Bank, IFC, and they use Mauritius as a way to de-risk investments that they are actually, investing into Africa. So this is the way things work, and you've got all those DFIs, which are development finance institutions, like Proparco, like FinFund, like Swedish Fund, like CAD Fund, which is the China Africa Development Fund, which actually have got their holdings or holding companies in Mauritius, and they use Mauritius as a launchpad to then invest into Africa, obviously with a social impact. So this is the interaction that we see with banks, multilateral institutions, etc., in Mauritius, which is taking place there for the continent.
So they're finding comfort in you being the best entry and place to position themselves and then work to the continent.
I think just maybe beyond just the entry point. I mean, I think if you're talking about, you obviously spoke to different types of funders or capital providers, right? I mean, banking is a team sport, and so I think we like to partner. So we like to partner with other banks, either through syndications and we like to partner with other non-banking financial institutions as well. Why do we like to do that? I think it's really to address the challenge around the funding gaps that exist across the continent. There's a number of key challenges that you'll find around borrowing costs and that sort of thing, and access to foreign currency in some instances. And so that's really something that we exist to bridge that gap, and we understand the scale of the challenge, but we're up for it, and so we're up for for doing deals on the continent, with the private equity funds, with corporates, with the wealthy individuals, etc., to make sure that we're able to tap into the opportunity that exists on the continent. Yeah.
And I'll quote a banker, he said, that I interviewed a while ago, he said, if we didn't understand the challenges, we wouldn't be here. And we are here because we understand the challenges. And this conversation would not be complete with us tapping into the challenges. So that's the direction I want to take in just a moment after you lean in, Bilal, is let's have a look at what are some of the challenges that we are dealing with and facing and solving for. But you can go ahead.
Thank you, Zanele. Supporting Chele's point, we see a lot of multinational African organizations which are then set up in Mauritius, which use Mauritius as a platform to borrow money in syndications with MCB and other banks, which is then deployed back onto the continent. So Mauritius functions well as a hub to raise capital in dollars or euros or large syndications for African projects, which all are centered out of Mauritius. And then just to support what Janesh was saying, when we talk about the $80 billion that has been allocated to the continent, we actually at an opportune time in history now, when Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, said that the traditional investment portfolio is changing from 60-40 equities and bonds to now include a 20% allocation to private equity. And that 20% allocation to private equity is where the continent benefits. So we as the African continent, we really only have deepest listed capital markets here in South Africa. With the rest of the continent, although there are listed equities and things, the trading isn't as liquid as Johannesburg. So what happens is the continent is actually a place that thrives on private equity and private credit. And with Larry Fink leading this charge that global investment should now include a 20% allocation to private equity and private credit, this is a huge opportunity for us on the continent. And Mauritius sees this as a fantastic opportunity to bring in capital, which we can then deploy for the expansion and growth of our continent.
Thank you so much. And I do want to ask you now to then take on my question around, let's face some of the challenges and the things that, not necessarily that it's a dead end, but they become blocks that you have to go through as an investor or to operate in the Mauritius environment.
Right, okay. Just to challenges around what Bilal was mentioning as well, in terms of raising capital. There are two angles to it. If you look at it from a purely Mauritian angle, right, raising capital locally is quite challenging. Debt capital is different, but equity, I think we lack the depth in our markets. Even if we look at our stock exchange, it's only around 60% of our GDP. So there is and it's a bit more conservative in terms of the appetite, right? So that remains challenging. But then that challenge is, if you look at it from another angle, we are quite successful at raising capital from Mauritius structures, okay? Investors, DFIs have used it for a number of years now to raise capital from foreign sources from Mauritius, okay? And it's raising capital has been successful, but there's another angle looking at it from investors will look at it from an entry point, okay, but also the exit is very important. And we've seen challenges around exit on the continent, but it's usually easier to exit an SPV, which is structured from Mauritius, as opposed to when you're doing a direct in-country investment.
Excellent point. Thank you for putting that in. Now, in all our conversations and looking at this table here, talent must be key to attract to Mauritius, to stay in Mauritius, to buy and to commit to staying in Mauritius. And I'm not sure, Gareth, out of your clientele and the people that you engage with, is it an easy pack and live in Mauritius decision for a lot of people?
I think for a lot of people, it becomes an adventure. So you take it in a 1 or 2 year contract to start. You then figure out if that's what you want. Once again, over the last 10 years, the schooling system in Mauritius has improved tenfold. We have fantastic schools, French schools, American schools, UK schools, and the local schooling system. Our medical facilities have improved 100% as well because of the amount of older people, thank you, who are going to go and live in Mauritius. So they need the medical facilities. But the government has seen this, and they've realized this must now keep up with what they basically are saying. Guys, come and live here, but we'll make sure it'll be comfortable for you as well. So to answer that, there's always space in the property market in Mauritius to rent and see if you want to stay and you want to stay further. And that's a very comfortable, easy space because you know you can leave after 2 years if you want to, or if it's not for you. And people then look at that as a wonderful adventure for 2 years with young kids. Those who do stay absolutely love Mauritius. They will be like me on the plane on Friday, looking forward to going home.
Whatever, just go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you know, I'm trying to hold it in here. But I think that let's throw forward a little bit. I don't want to lose time in saying 2025. We come from a number of headwinds in the last couple of years. We've got to look forward and say we're going to have those headwinds. We're going to have climate challenges. We're going to have potential conflict in the continent. There's connectivity issues, technology, education, lots of youth, no jobs. How are you planning and preparing for the future?
See, talking about headwinds, you know, the world is a messy place, okay? But, you know, the fun fact and the interesting thing is that Mauritius, in terms of its strategic positioning and the fact that it is friends with nearly all countries in the world, every country in the world, makes it very interesting because Mauritius has got no enemies and we even don't have a military. So the way that people are going to navigate that is very interesting because being based in Mauritius and also being an IFC, there is the opportunity to actually leverage against those political headwinds or economic headwinds or whatever it is, to be able to de-risk investments and for example, go into Africa. Or it might also be vice versa, because we've seen investments from Africa going into other countries, okay? So this is where you navigate it because you need a launch pad, you need a place which is safe and effective, and where, you know, you have the rule of law, and, you know, if ever things are going to go south, you know, you're going to count on the system, on the legal and regulatory system to make it right.
And I think the corporates, the strength of the corporates in Mauritius are going to play a big role in navigating some of this. So clearly, your view from the bank, how are you seeing the future and navigating, also being a contributor to the Mauritian environment, whether it be in education, through social impact, climate change, but also in what role you need to serve to keep Mauritius strong?
So there's a couple of ways of looking at that, but I think, I mean, so, you know, just leaning into the point around headwinds, when you have headwinds, you also have some tailwinds, right? So for us, we're looking at the tailwinds, we're looking at the opportunity that's presented by some of the challenges. So if I, you know, just kind of tie together our conversation around some of the core sectors that we see driving growth on the continent. So one is, for example, infrastructure, but specifically digital infrastructure. So when you look at you know, the numbers around digitalization and digital trade, you see that already 35% of Africa's service exports are related to digital trade. So we're seeing, obviously, and I think all of us will have been familiar with that or engaged with that in one way or another, around maybe the use of mobile money, improved connectivity in rural areas, and obviously urban areas, leveraging 5G, etc. Why is that relevant? Because what we're doing is obviously then following our clients, following the corporates and where they're going, and taking advantage of some of these tailwinds. So if we take a forward looking view, then we're looking at, so obviously as a bank, we're looking at, okay, well, where do we need to be? So one of those examples is, currently we obviously present in the Indian Ocean Islands, so Mauritius, Maldives, Madagascar, and then we have hubs across the continent, in Johannesburg, where I'm based, Nigeria. We recently opened an office in Nigeria. We've got presence in Kenya as well. So we are really looking to leverage those tailwinds and support corporates as they move into that.
And you have to package that for your clients. Bilal, you packaging the messaging for your clients. So when you package it, how do you what is it that you need to, what is it that you put up front consistently so that Mauritius has got a consistent message for people that come in?
I think the consistent message that comes out is safety, predictability, consistency. And you rightly raised the increasing global volatility. And what happens is, when the world becomes a relatively more volatile place, Mauritius looks relatively more safe. And actually, this geopolitical tension sells Mauritius as a de-risk, where people want to allocate some of their assets to a safer jurisdiction, legally, as Janesh has pointed out, to then deploy capital from that jurisdiction, which is safe from expropriation or war or whatever other issue may be happening in Europe or Africa or wherever, right? So I think that's the first important thing. The second thing is, as an investment manager, investment returns are necessary, but nowadays insufficient. Investors are looking for investments that do good. It doesn't matter if you're giving the best return. You actually need to give the best return and ensure that you are doing good with your money. So you need to be investing in, as we say, telecoms, financial inclusion, small businesses, private credit, supporting the SDG goals. And investors want to feel that their money is doing something that is ethical and good for social development. And we as a business, and many of us here, we encapsulate that ethos.
Thank you so much, Bilal, for bringing up those points. I still think that they also ask, what's the value proposition, Antish? They probably still ask, so what do you have to offer me from an incentive perspective? Whilst you have this holistic offering, when you respond to that, what do you say? Like, what do I get out of coming to Mauritius?
Look, there is the lifestyle one, okay, that we've already discussed. But then once they're there, once they become tax resident, okay, the taxation system is quite efficient, and the tax rates also quite competitive, right? And sometimes, we talked about headwinds. For us, it becomes opportunities, because then people start to think about risk diversification and the value proposition of Mauritius and the structures that you could have. You could set up a trust or a foundation. Wealthy families have family offices. So with that, they can do a lot of things, right? So I think the value proposition is quite compelling when it comes to Mauritius for those wealthy families.
And if I think back, actually, and I could be wrong because I'm not the expert, the Mauritian family business concept, where a lot of businesses were built around families in manufacturing and in the creation of products, still, some of those values are still in there, that Mauritius is a home more than just a place to have a business. And, and over time, it probably has influenced it going forward. But you've also directly offered direct incentives for retirees, or people whom you say, if you buy a property, you get residency. Do you want to lean into that?
Correct. So, the government have been very forward-thinking with inviting people to spend over a certain amount, retirees, hence the better medical facilities now, which we've now made catch up. But also on an investment plane, if you want to come and invest, because we have such strong legal and financial base, it means that when there are headwinds that we're talking about now, we've still got the same structure that's strong. It stays strong at the bottom. And when that base is strong, Zanele, no matter what is happening around the world, Bilal's right, we'll be compared to other areas. You know, are we more risky or less risky than going into Mauritius? And Mauritius is generally quite boring and quite plain and seen as somewhere that, you know what, if there's nowhere else, it's a good place to put your money. Because the ease of getting in, the ease of getting out, it might not be as easy as we'd like it to be, but the reality is it's there. It's always on the table. You know what you're getting. And it's a good, safe environment to put your money in. Property is exactly the same. When people buy property there, they understand it could take 6 months to get all your, compliance done, whereas a year ago or 2 years ago, it could have taken 3 months. But that's the world. It's not just Mauritius. And if we handle it properly, as we're doing now in Mauritius, it benefits us. It just makes us look more appealing, especially in bad times.
And so much closer and so much more similar in ecosystem to South Africa or, to many countries across the continent. But you wanted to lean in on something.
I just want to add to what Garrett's saying. So, and you're asking about headwinds. So one of the headwinds we face in the business is that sometimes it takes longer than clients expect to open whatever accounts, custody, banking, whichever other investment account. And if a client has a very simple structure, that can happen in a week. But sometimes clients have more complicated structures or trusts or corporations. And because Mauritius now has a robust KYC framework, we take the time to do proper due diligence to ensure that we stay on the white list from a KYC perspective, which makes the region a more robust, safe place to do business. But the headwind that comes with that is sometimes it takes longer to get things done. But that's just a nuance that I wanted to raise so that we all clear about the reality of how to do business.
But when you're serious, you understand that that's actually important.
Yes.
If you're serious about business, you're serious about your business, you understand why that needs to be done. But there's a huge goal for the continent when it comes to the African Union's agenda for 2063. So you have 2063 as your target. What are your ambitions to respond and to help to contribute and play a decisive and very impactful role in that target?
So I would say Mauritius is moving with the times, okay? Talking from a strictly regulatory/legal perspective, just to take a very example of the bat, we've got around 350 million Africans in sub-Saharan Africa who are unbanked. It translates roughly into like 55% of the African population which does not have a bank account. So what is Mauritius doing in that? It's digital inclusion or digital financial inclusion is something which is very important. So over and above being a launchpad for investments, Mauritius has also got an ecosystem which attracts, for example, fintech service providers. And I'm talking about crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending. So they've got like specialized licenses that they can take in Mauritius. And those licenses also come with a robust, I would say, regulatory framework where each and everything is regulated. And when I'm talking about each and everything, I'm generally talking about protection of borrowers, protection of investors also. And if an investor comes in and cannot find his happiness in those licenses, we've got something which is very flexible, which is called this regulatory sandbox license. So basically, go ahead, do your project. And then we will come, not we, but the regulator will come and apply rules around it to regulate that business. So which ensures that when you are flexible enough, when you're robust enough, and when you're going out, for example, into Africa, you have the flexibility which is required. You are backed by a jurisdiction, which is a leading financial center in Africa, plus a whitelisted jurisdiction. So that is something which is very interesting.
And you saw when I started taking notes that it was exactly on that part. The sandbox concept, not new, but interesting to hear, but also the nuance around catering for the unbanked, from the Mauritius platform. The bank's view or your view on segmentation of focus, because we tend to think it's, fund managers, big corporates coming in to invest. How are we playing for those who are disadvantaged in the continent?
So I think I'll look at it from two angles, right? So one will be the ESG angle. I don't think any conversation is complete without talking ESG or AI. But the reason that's important is that from an African perspective, the S is really, and the G is, particularly important. So if you're looking at, just talking about leaning towards 2063. I think looking forward, you've got from an E perspective, you've got about some 600 million Africans without access to electricity, right? Without access to electricity. But then at the same time, you've got the social challenges around that. So how are we supporting all of that? So when we're looking at private equity funds, corporates, we're looking at the ways in which they're doing business and looking at the ways in which they have impact on different communities to address the social aspect of ESG, looking at the governance aspects of their business to cover the G aspect of ESG, looking at obviously supporting the just transition and looking at cleaner sources of energy and how they're operating in that particular space.
And it's kind of automatic, hey? You don't actually have to direct it. Businesses will come to you with that flavor because businesses are solving for Africa. I'd love to have a question or two from the audience if anybody wants to lean in and ask a question. And I'm waiting to see if our online guests also have any questions. So just do raise your hand when I look through the side again. But Bilal, I think over to you. Some parting shots to our audience around the work that you're doing and how you see it also solving for the future.
So at Stewards, we are passionate about social upliftment, financial inclusion, information inclusion. So we focus a lot on directing capital from developed markets onto the continent for example, infrastructure like telecom towers, raising funds on the capital, which are then raising funds on the continent, which are then deployed into developed markets to give a good risk-adjusted return. From a Mauritian perspective, also just to add to what my colleague Janesh is saying about the sandbox license, Mauritius has been one of the leaders in terms of virtual assets and digital assets. That was incubated in the sandbox license, and Mauritius was one of the first countries to pass the VITOS legislation for virtual assets. We've seen my vision for Mauritius as a South African who's been in Mauritius since 2007 is I have seen Mauritius, I've heard the stories of Mauritius before I came, being an agriculture-based economy, and which transitioned then into a manufacturing economy. Now, think about how complicated that jump is, right? How much of investment needed to be done to invest into machinery, upskilling staff and everything from agriculture, then jumping into hospitality and the amount of capital required to build a hotel, train the staff, then jumping into financial services, building accountants, lawyers, and that whole space. The next leap for Mauritius, in my view, is fintech. And fintech is such an easy leap for Mauritius to take. The next baby step for Mauritius to take into fintech is much simpler than every other big jump it did, because all you need to do is get some smart guys to sit in a room with a laptop and an internet connection, and you've got a fintech hub, right? So all you got to do is bring the talent to Mauritius. And I think with the lifestyle that we have in Mauritius, it lends to that. With the legal infrastructure, we've got all the right ingredients now to make Mauritius the Silicon Valley of our continent.
And so lots to look forward to. I think that the doors are open. The social environment is just rife for any investor or anybody who wants to position themselves in Mauritius to start the hub, and create it from there. But we also have the honor today, and I wanted just to, before we close it, I'm sure you're very well versed with being put on the spot, so do forgive me though. We do have Her Excellency Maria Martin, who's the High Commissioner for Mauritius to South Africa. And Commissioner, before we say goodbye to our guests, I thought maybe you could just lean in with your words or your thoughts about the Mauritius-Africa relationship.
Thank you. I must thank you, first of all, for inviting me, and I'm very grateful to having listened to this very knowledgeable panel. I just wanted to say, whatever they're saying is quite true. Mauritius is a country which is very open. Mauritius is a country which is very stable, and we have a government and a population which is very ambitious also. So I believe that the environment is there to help and to collaborate with the whole of the continent to make sure that we all benefit from exchange and at the same time investment and the business environment. I believe that everyone will find, who wants to invest in Mauritius, will find a sector where they are able to do so. And we are very open to new sectors as well, because like Mr. Bilal has said, I believe that there are things that Mauritius has been doing since its beginning and progressed, and we're still open to progress. If you've listened to I don't know if you had the opportunity to listen to the budget, but the Prime Minister himself has said that we have to open the country to new sectors, including blue economy, including fintech, including sustainable development, etc., that we need to develop further, and we are willing to have investors to come to Mauritius and to do that. And here at the Commission, of course, we are open to helping anyone who would like to have any information with regards to however way they can invest in Mauritius, and I'm sure they'll be welcome.
Thank you so much. I think that's an excellent summary. And what's interesting is today's conversation was supposed to be about the eye on Mauritius, but it looks like Mauritius is saying their eyes are on everybody else, that Mauritius is the right place to come and invest in. And Tish, some parting words from your side as well before we finish off.
You see, we are enablers, right, of investment into Africa and beyond. Okay, we are partners, right, and we've been tried and tested over years, and the system works. The ecosystem works. The investor community has used it for a number of years, and we welcome them to use it more in the future. And yes, thank you for reminding me, Bilal. Mauritius has retained its investment grade, and with Botswana, we are the only two countries in Africa holding that investment grade, and that's very relevant for the investor community.
And you say it like it's a light thing, but it's actually been a huge achievement.
It is, especially in the difficult context, especially post-COVID with all the macroeconomic challenges. It's been, I think it's a commendable feat that we've maintained that investment grade.
And you go all around the world talking to people about Mauritius and living in Mauritius and staying in Mauritius. Your entity, your business as well, you found that, do you think it's big enough that there are going to be many more of Gareth Land type of institutions coming in and opening it up to the rest of the world and the continent?
Most definitely. And I think the easiest way I can put that into context for today is that all five of us come from different sectors in Mauritius, but collectively I think we're stronger as one group. Okay, and I look at Mauritius as being the same with Africa. I think Mauritius is the stable point to look after and help people get into Africa, and that's what I think Mauritius will become, and that's where we're heading at the moment. So whether it's the property sector, the banking sector, the legal frameworks, coming to get finance, it's all geared towards something bigger, and I think that's where Mauritius really outshines itself and does extremely well. There's obviously competition on the island amongst all of us to try and get the business, but that's a good thing because it creates a better service level of what we can then offer other people. So I think Mauritius deserves a big pat on the back.
And everybody gets a chance to reflect back. We're able to look 15 years back and really see the difference. There's a lot of resilience that's going to be required. And within the legal framework that governs and that keeps the stability, which is not always guaranteed. We've been through a lot. It's not always guaranteed. Are you pretty confident that institutionally and government-wise and all the institutions there, that we are geared up for the agility of the future ones, and Gele referred to it as AI, as youth, as social impact. So what are your final thoughts on just the agility of the island?
Definitely. So I'll just circle back a little bit to the first question that you asked me at the beginning of the panel. I was talking about the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary. And the judiciary is also moving with that. So over and above being an arbitration hub for Africa, Mauritius also has got we've got a commercial division of the Supreme Court, but there's something big which is going to come, maybe in 1 or 2 years. I don't know exactly when. But it's on the table. It's an international commercial court for Mauritius, which I don't think we have in Africa. We've got in big financial centers, like London, like Singapore, Dubai, Qatar, etc. So international commercial court, what it will do, basically adjudicate on complex international investment disputes, with the opportunity also to have foreign judges sitting on that bench. So that is something which is really interesting, because right now at the moment, the country, if you go to for example, to the Supreme Court, there's an investment fund, there's a dispute over there. the judge would exactly understand what are the nomenclatures, what are the different terms that are being used. So they are used to that, I would say maybe on a daily basis. But this one is going to take it even a notch further. So this is where, in terms of agility, the country is heading, over and above the laws, the regulations, etc. So very, very hopeful that things are moving in the right direction.
And it's quite an interesting framework when one considers how money requires, or investments need to be in economies that not only protect but also enable money to invest and to do good. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. We are going to continue here on this side, but I wanted to just take this moment to say thank you to our guests who are watching us live as well as on our social digital platforms. Thank you for joining this panel discussion and a special feature. We have many more, so always keep your dial on CNBC Africa. Thank you for watching, and I'm Zanele Morrison, and I'll catch you in the next one. Oh.